For many years, research scientists have been searching for ways to educate and to vitalize the natural defensive system in our bodies called the immune system. Never has this quest been more important than now. It is accepted that we are losing the war against infectious disease. Many medical scientists and practitioners have resigned themselves to the fact that it is not if, but when, the next worldwide pandemic strikes, for which we will have no protection. Because our ability to produce more powerful antibiotics and antivirals is being overtaken by the speed which the germs that threaten us have demonstrated in producing new and ever more lethal strains. Around the world, literally billions have been spent on the research and treatment of cancer, yet the death rate hasn't significantly changed. Autoimmune diseases and allergies are becoming accepted as almost the norm because of the increasing number of people who suffer from these conditions. So what must we do? Stand idly by and accept as inevitable that we are increasingly vulnerable? Fortunately, because of new discoveries that you need to know about, the answer is no. We don't have to accept such an outcome. We can empower our immune systems in order to give us and our family and friends and everyone we can share this information with the optimal opportunity to live the long and healthy life that we desire and deserve. Because of transfer factors. Transfer factors are nature's gift to us. They've been available to us for as long as life has existed on this earth. But only recently have we discovered their empowering role for our immune systems. In 1949, a researcher in South Carolina named H. Sherwood Lawrence was trying to understand how a person can become immune to a disease, how one's body can recognize and respond to a threat without becoming ill from that threat. So Dr. Lawrence found a lab assistant who had been exposed to tuberculosis. He knew this because that individual, when given something called a tuberculin skin test, reacted positively by whelping up in the area of the TB skin test injection. And then Dr. Lawrence tested other assistants until he found one who had a negative TB skin test, which meant that individual had never been exposed to tuberculosis. So Dr. Lawrence drew some blood from the TB skin test positive individual and processed it by spinning it in a centrifuge to separate the white blood cells, the germ-fighting cells called lymphocytes, from the red blood cells. And he took the white blood cells and by further processing broke their cell walls and removed the fluid and collected the fluid from within those fractured lymphocytes. And he put the fluid into a syringe and he injected it into the assistant who had never been exposed to tuberculosis and waited. It was really a pretty nervy thing to do. 2 days later, he did a TB skin test on the assistant who had never been exposed to tuberculosis. And lo and behold, the skin test whelped up and he or she reacted just as if they had been exposed to tuberculosis. Dr. Lawrence had transferred the recognition of the tuberculosis germ from one who had been exposed to tuberculosis to one who had never been exposed. He didn't understand exactly what had happened. He just knew he had transferred something, some factor from one individual to another, and by doing so, he had transferred the ability to recognize a germ, tuberculosis, in an individual who hadn't had prior exposure. And thus the term transfer factor was introduced into the scientific world. Over the next several decades, millions of dollars were spent on transfer factor research, and over 3,000 papers were written. But the process of producing transfer factors was very expensive and time-consuming. Use of transfer factors was mainly confined to the lab, and the public was unaware of the potential health benefits that transfer factors offered. In 1989, 2 researchers in South Carolina made a very important discovery. Doctors Wilson and Paddock found that transfer factors were abundant in the first maternal milk, called colostrum, that's produced right at and right after birth. Further research revealed that all mammals produce transfer factors that are molecularly identical. It was discovered that Mother Nature has devised a method for the mother to pass on her immune system knowledge to her newborn by nursing. This first benevolent act by the mother enables the newborn, thrust from a warm, sterile environment of the womb to a harsh, cold world filled with germs, to survive. Let's examine exactly how this happens. Chickenpox is a good example to use because before the chickenpox vaccine, most people contracted this viral illness. But extremely rarely did anyone have a second bout with chickenpox. Why? Why not develop the illness over and over? Because the individual may have been exposed to chickenpox dozens, hundreds of times after that first episode. On the screen, you'll see a diagram which demonstrates how one builds up immunity to a disease. The straight line highlighted is a time sequence from the exposure to a disease until the immune system begins to respond. In this instance,